Welcome to Chaotic Underground. I am your host, Zach. I'm joined by Ryan Damask and Simpai, also known as Steven, the other better halves of the show. In case you don't know, we are it's math, dude. Don't question me. In case you guys don't know, we have just kind of a reminder. We have divided our podcast into two separate podcasts. We have now Chaotic Podcast Proper, which is going to be me, Ryan, and Jay primarily. We talk about kind of Marvel, our nerdy stuff, all things geek related there. And then here is going to be known as Chaotic Underground, and we talk about aliens and ghosts and a whole bunch of other things that are probably not real. And so welcome to the Sure. So let's try. We're hopping in. Today we're talking about the Men in Black. No, we're not talking about the movie starring Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith and Chris Hemsworth and whoever the hell they started bringing into the franchise. But we're talking about the actual real Men in Black. I was the one who proposed this topic because I feel like it's a kind of a rite of passage if you have any kind of mystery podcast in any sense. And then I proceeded to do some research on it, and I have found, as you guys probably found too in your research, there's not much out there on these guys.
Yeah, there's about like 8 to 10 like real like lengthy stories. Ryan put it best when he said, every time I've looked at a video or read anything about this, the end always is the same thing. It's like, oh, there's a lot more out there than we can tell you right now, so go ahead and go check that out.
But they all tell the same stories.
It's all the same.
And it's like the same stories you find anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. But the skinny on these guys basically is if it's a part of the whole UFO community, the alien hunters. Generally, traditionally, they show up if you've seen anything not paranormal, anything UFO related, alien related, extraterrestrial related. Usually within a day to a week later, the Men in Black show up, dressed in black suits. Sometimes they have no eyebrows. Sometimes they have, like, I've even read one report that they don't have ears sometimes. Sometimes they don't have noses. Very pale red lips. Like, that's one description. Then there's been other descriptions that they've just been normal dudes. They show up to your place and they quite frankly threaten you. And threaten to cause you harm, whether it be, socially or physically, or that they're not really portrayed as the good guys as they were in the movies, which is based off of a comic book actually. But yeah, so Men in Black, I guess we could start with the beginning with the first case, the 1947 case.
Yeah, so that first sighting or the first hearing about the Men in Black, there was a UFO sighting supposedly by a man named Harold Dahl, and he was a marine scavenger, what may have you. He was picking up some logs on his boat out in the Puget Sound of Washington.
Yeah, and his homeboy with him as well. Like, it was. This is off to a great start.
It was his son.
I heard it was his partner though. So I feel like every research I did, like, there's different names, there's different accounts. It's
so this is another thing I brought up to Steven before we recorded, was like, it's one of those things where, like, whenever you're talking about stuff that isn't necessarily like factual, like we're talking about some accounts that have been misconstrued and stuff, we have names being different, we have dates being different, we have like lengths of time being different. It's even stuff like when we did DB Cooper episode, like how long it was before they found this or whatever. Like, it's always going to be like that, and so it's hard to know what to take as. I mean, none of it's fact, right? But it's hard to know what to take.
So there's a lot of like truth. That kind of back and forth on this. I mean, in some accounts, he is a salvager. In some accounts, he's a Puget Sound patrolman. I think the only detail that I managed to actually find that everybody agreed on is that his dog died.
Yeah.
Like, yes. It's dead serious. Like,
I'm not convinced that dog existed.
I mean, and that's where you get into the weird thing about this. So Harold, depending on which one you talk about, he's the first guy, right?
Yeah. He's the main. So he's the main storyteller, the narrator of this story, of this occurrence, and so he's on he's on the lake and he sees multiple donut-shaped saucers in the sky, and lights. They're moving very erratically, very strangely. And then one of them actually, in the account that I read, one of them actually swoops down onto a ship and like excretes like this liquid metal onto his ship, and that's what killed his dog, essentially. And I also read that it broke his partner or son at this point's arm. We don't know. And then he went and reported it to his supervisor, and then they reported it to government officials. One thing to also note with this is Harold Dahl, or Howard Dahl, or whatever his name is. I don't know.
Let's go with Harold. Pretty
Harold
sure it
sounds.
Let's go with Harold Dahl. Okay.
Most accounts say Harold.
Most accounts say Harold. Okay. So Harold Dahl, he's not exactly a reliable narrator, is one of the things that I read. He was a World War II vet, and he would tell stories about how he fought monsters in the war and demons in the war and stuff. So he's already kind of like known for being a bit of a storyteller. Yeah.
Yeah, he submitted that story to Amazing Stories, and they can't corroborate it because it was in Burma during World War II. So you can't tell the guy, no, you didn't fight demons in a cave in Burma during World War II. Like, there's no proof to like either say yes or no. So, again, like you said, unreliable narrator and kind of a flim-flammer.
Flim-flammer.
Yes, I don't know why I pulled that out.
I hate those damn flim-flammers.
Damn flim-flammers on my lawn.
I'm not selling myself as a young person. Hold on. This story account slaps.
Yeah. Did you have a problem with the flappers too?
Wise guy, eh?
So he had this encounter where they supposedly dropped that slag all over him, and he went back, showed a supervisor saw it, and it looked like some crazy crash ship or something. And
there's two different accounts, though. There's one that it was a liquid metal that they threw on the ship, and then there's one that was a crash landing on the beach. Like, because I read both accounts, and it's like,
yep, yeah. And so these men in black show up sometime over the next few days. Most accounts say it was the next day. Doesn't really matter, right? They showed up supposedly, and basically asked him to give them any evidence that he had of the crash or of the slag that fell or anything like that, and then threatened him to keep his mouth shut, basically. I think I read that they threatened to make his wife more ugly. Basically beat her up or hurt her in some way.
Yeah, they used some sort of, it was very 1940s like mobster style. Like, you got a pretty wife, how about she won't be pretty that much long, something like that, along the lines of that. Which is, I don't know, like, if we're gonna go with any,
which is weird for a government official to say.
Well, I love that the first Ryan's version of this is like the most backhanded like comment on the planet. It's like, your wife is already ugly, we'll make her uglier.
No, like, so the Men in Black, they weren't good dudes. They weren't perceived as good dudes. And so after this account, like every other urban legend out there, it started snowballing into different accounts, and then sightings started to happen. And then the Men in Black evolved from just two dudes in a suit into maybe they're the aliens in the suit. Oh, then they have special powers. And I feel like with every story that it did snowball into like this outrageous, like awesome, like phenomenon. However, there's a bit more to it because it was also supposedly perpetuated by the government, which we'll get into later, that's the interesting part of the story to me personally.
Yeah, so it's hard to say when it comes to this stuff, guys, because in so many instances of these accounts or these stories that happened over the past century, we see where there's a story that's purported to be true, and then it's later shown to not be as true as they said it was. But then sometimes they'll go back, and then the reason that they said it wasn't true was because they were pressured into it, but now they're saying it is true again. So it's really hard to follow, and it's really hard to know what's real and what's not. Similar to, you know, any other paranormal phenomenon or UFO sighting or whatever that we talk about on here. Like, it's hard to know what is fact, but they're interesting stories nonetheless. This particular story of Harold Dahl, he ended up, you know, even though they told him to shut up, he had already told the story to people before they showed up to his house. And that story kind of perpetuated and became a big deal. They started talking about it in news outlets and stuff, to the point where he eventually came forward and said, "Oh, I made the whole thing up. It was all a hoax. That all that slag, it was just some aluminum. Yeah, I made the whole thing up. I was just trying to get attention."
Mm-hmm.
But then years later, he comes back again and he says, "It actually wasn't made up. I had to recant that because I got pressured into it by these men in black." And so it's like, yeah. You can, it's like crying wolf and then crying alien and then crying men in black. So
I think some I'm going to just tell kind of like some of the other ones, because there's also the stories written by Gray Barker is his name, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's he wrote the book They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers.
Yeah.
And so it's like this whole, like, you know, book about the men in black, and it literally it's a book about flying saucers and how there's this group of people who come and respond to UFO sightings and people who have seen UFOs and are trying to like kind of get that information out in the world. And it turns out that Gray Barker, you know, was just wrote stories, and like it was like when he was 18, a friend of his basically kind of challenged him to kind of create this idea, and that's basically what he did. There's an article by John C. Sherwood that is titled "Gray Barker, My Friend, the Myth Maker." That claims that in the late 1960s he cooperated with Gray Barker and urged him to develop a hoax. And they called it the Black Men, which is slightly racist and probably not the first choice they should have gone with. And it's basically like, basically UFO inhabitants that would silence, anybody that kind of talked about this sort of thing. So it's literally in a story out there. And like, it's weird because some people actually view it as kind of like this like nonfiction book. And some people view it as like an actual fiction book. So you have this game of telephone going on where some people are like, it's true. And others are like, that's just a story that's made up by somebody. So you get all these conflicting, situations, a lot like what we're dealing with while trying to research this bad boy.
Hear me out. The men in black are actually tulpas.
I was going to say that later in the episode, you son of a bitch.
Yes. That's called group mind, Ryan. We're on the same wavelength here.
Enough people made stories about them that they got enough people to believe in them that they actually became their own organization and real people. And unfortunately, people believe that they didn't have eyebrows, and now they got to walk around without eyebrows. It's not their fault. They didn't shave them. We thought they were that way.
Well, you were the one that put it in my head that Jeff Bezos is a Men in Black.
Yeah, there's a really
he totally is.
There's one account where this man in black comes into this office. We'll play the video for you as I'm talking. But he comes in and he basically it looks like a reenactment from like a Lifetime documentary of true crime or something. And he like comes in, puts his hands down on the counter, and then he like mind wipes the woman and makes her come with him. And it looks so fake, but it looks like Jeff Bezos, and you can't convince me that it's not.
I just think I think there's a lot of like memeable content with these guys. Like, so I got the info on the Dr. Herbert Hopkins one. So that took place in 1976. Okay, so UFO researcher, it's kind of like his side, his passion, his life. He has all this research on UFO research. He gets a phone call. This took place in 1976 from supposedly Men in Black. Okay. He asks to see all of his research, or he wants to meet, and he's like, yeah, sure. And then right after he gets off the phone, knock on the door, Men in Black is there. And this is one of the weird ones with the weird pale skins and the red lips, et cetera, et cetera. And then he basically threatens him. and but the way he threatens him, this is where it's a little interesting. This is where I'm like, okay. He takes a coin, a penny, I believe, hands it.
The cool thing about this, right? I don't mean to cut you off, but the cool thing about it is apparently, like, the agent knows everything about this man in that moment, that he happens to know that he has 2 coins in his pocket, and he tells him to take out one of the coins and hold it in his hand without seeing this coin before.
Okay, now did he get visited by a man in black or a fucking magician? You know, it's
but all the accounts go to say that, like, they felt like the man in black that was speaking to them, like, knew everything about them and was almost like reading their mind. Like, that gets a little bit more paranormal than just being a government agency, but that's one, like, common occurrence in all these accounts. But I digress. He pulled out a coin.
He pulled out a coin, and then he changed the color of the coin. The Men in Black did, and then it changed from like a copper to a silver, and then it faded out of existence in his hand. And then he basically said, like that coin, you will disappear too if you don't get rid of your research. Ooh, and then the mystery continues. And
this threat that he made was I want to say, I'm going to try to guess my remembrance of the name. So there was this publicized doctor who died, and if I recall correctly, his name was Benny Barker. And right after he made the coin disappear, the man in black basically said to Hopkins, he said, Benny Barker didn't have a heart, much like you don't have a coin.
Barney Hill.
It's not Barney Hill, you liar.
It's Byron.
It's Barney
Hank
Hill.
Shaw.
What? Oh,
he then inquired as to whether Hopkins was familiar with alleged UFO abductee Barney Hill. Hopkins replied that he had heard of Hill, was under the impression that he had died in a not too distant past. The man in black informed Hopkins that was correct. He said, Barney didn't have a heart, just like you no longer have a coin. That's from the website The Night Sky, by the way.
I'm just going to start writing everything down because I just feel like I did the research, okay? I absolutely did the research. I'm just terrible with names. You're lucky I remember your fucking names.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And it doesn't
right,
help
Brian?
that... But it just doesn't, because it's the stories have changed multiple times. Like, it's hard. And anyway, moving on. Those are just 2 of the main instances. Like, those are 2 of the big stories out there that are kind of in the forefront of, if you hear Men in Black, I say if anybody has researched the Men in Black in any sense, those are probably the 2 biggest stories that would pop up. That and I'll go for it, Steven.
So I gotta ask, like, I listened to you guys talk about Polybius. Can you imagine, like, because they got associated with the Men in Black with Polybius. Can you imagine being the Men in Black and like they're sending guys out? They're like, go threaten that guy that saw a UFO. Go mess with this, couple in England and send an old guy to stand outside their house. You're gonna go take care of that weird arcade machine we put out in fucking Oregon or wherever it was. Like you're like, shit, I did all this training. I shaved my eyebrows for this, and I gotta go fuck around in an arcade. This is bullshit.
So this is the theory. This is what it is then. They're actually just dudes. They shave their eyebrows. They make themselves look like famous 1992 movie Powder. And then they put them in a black suit, and then they send them on odd jobs. That's what they do. And then they're like...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you're fine. That's like my comedy ended at Powder.
They're like a right-wing human supremacist group that's just going around to make sure there's no aliens crossing into America.
We don't want these aliens stealing our jobs and
self-funded,
taking our women.
They get a little cut of all the super PAC money, and that's what funds them to go around and buy their fancy suits and visit old people out in the country who may or may not have seen UFOs.
Oh my God. See, that's why it doesn't make sense. Because we're going to get into a different side of the Men in Black not too long from now that makes a little more sense. But this is why it doesn't make sense. So these accounts are like most of the ones that you hear about, you find in the research, literally involve some degree of like hoaxery, made up stories, submitting to magazines, things like that. But then it's inconsistent because you get different descriptions. Some are just normal dudes with hats and suits, and some dudes don't have eyebrows and skin. It looks weird, and they have like red lipstick on or something like that. I've seen all kinds of shit, but they don't go after every UFO sighting. They don't.
No, and that's and that is a very good point. I think is that's a huge hole in the plot. But then again, what if there's only like literally 2 Men in Black? Because it's like it's always 2, right? Like in every research I've done, it's either 1 or 2. I've never I didn't read one that recounted that there was 3 or 4. And I think,
I think there were a couple that there were 3. I never heard about more than 3.
Really? Okay. And I would like to lean towards the fact that they are just kind of dudes with hats, and then the stories kind of got perpetuated, and the gasoline matches to gasoline kind of a thing.
That's why it doesn't make sense as well. So you have these Men in Black show up and be like, "Don't talk about that UFO sighting," but I don't care if you talk about me. Like if it was an actual like deep state secret organization, like they wouldn't want you talking about them either. I feel like they just murder people if it was a real thing. And then there's the fact that like basically the History Channel became a UFO channel for like a whole fucking decade. Like, yeah, the guy from Ancient Aliens is all over the internet still. But is it because they just seem so fucking insane that they allow it to happen? Like that's, right. You know, kind of. So is it like subterfuge? And that's kind of one of those things that I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. And again, I gotta laugh, like, because it became something more. First it was aliens, and then it was like, okay, kind of like mind control, arcade machine. I mean, I think they've been connected to MK Ultra, but in reality, those are like CIA agents and actual members of the government that can be accounted for in documentation. Yeah. And then, you know, so there's a lot of just weird, again, telephone game going on where people said it's because of UFOs, and then someone's like, well, I saw them around what supposedly was a Bigfoot's, you know, grounds, and it gets really muddled.
What's crazy to me is we have Hollywood makeup artists that can make Steven look like Shaquille O'Neal, right? Aliens can fly across the universe.
That was the worst choice you could possibly go
all
with.
All the celebrities that you had to say. I'm sorry. I know you're trying to get a point across, but
I know.
I cannot.
First choice was Rosie O'Donnell, but I felt I needed to go broader.
No, stick with Rosie O'Donnell. I'd rather be Rosie O'Donnell in this situation.
Write that timestamp down.
Okay. Aliens can fly across the universe. They can somehow shapeshift or make themselves look like humans, but they couldn't just get a little tan on there. They couldn't put some eyebrows in there. They have it. It just blows my.
Let's just hire one of those Hollywood makeup artists to make him look like Shaquille O'Neal, Ryan.
But my point in this, and sorry, I'm going down. So there's two tracks. So there's 2 tracks that you can go down with Men in Black. One, that they are government agents that are super intimidating and very secretive. The other one is that they actually are alien entities themselves, trying to keep humans from the truth. I was leaning on that side when I said this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but it works for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely does. Like someone get a drip coordinator in there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this is always a really interesting kind of take on it. Is one of the reasons I think that it actually ends up this description is because you can't refute somebody who says they all look like a fucking cue ball. Like no one's gonna be like, I got visited by a Men in Black with a beard. Yeah. If you just tell everyone you have no hair on the head, the skin looks pale, it's weird.
I got bald. Visited by this 7-foot guy in a suit, and he looked just like Shaquille O'Neal. You'd be like, I think you're getting at something.
Then Shaq tweets later that he confirms it. Yeah, I was there, guys. It's me.
It was
Shit.
me. I wear a suit sometimes.
Jesus Christ.
God.
Okay.
Anyways.
So, yeah.
So we kind of have the gist of the Men in Black and who they are and everything.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I kind of wanted to get into in this half is the whole aspect of OSI, which stands for Office of Special Investigation, which I feel personally would be the actual closest thing to the real life Men in Black. There's a huge story that involves them and Richard Dottie and Paul Bennewitz, which is kind of the biggest story that everybody kind of knows about. But for those for the uninitiated, we would be more than happy to talk about it. Long story short, with Richard Dottie, he was an agent of the OSI, and Paul Bennewitz was a scientist who actually lived, like, his lab was across the street from the Air Force Base, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yes.
And he was a whiz. He was basically a whiz with electronics, and everything in his field, and he would actively pick up radio frequencies from the military base, and then he'd actually he picked up some information that they didn't want him to hear about, but him being the good patriot that he is, he actually contacted them after picking up these frequencies, like, hey, I'm picking up these frequencies from you guys, and yeah, so he basically outed himself, and then
but he didn't think they were frequencies from the Air Force Base, right? Like, he thought he was picking up some phenomena that was happening around him, that he was picking up some extraterrestrial type stuff.
Yeah.
And
saw
not
flying
thinking
around
about the fact that he lives across the street from this Air Force base during, like, when was this? This was like during the height of the Cold War, right? Like, where they're testing stuff out.
This is like the late 70s, early 80s, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is a perfect opportunity. I am a military brat. I grew up around Air Force bases my entire life. You can live 25 miles away from an Air Force base and still see shit in the sky.
Yeah.
You can hear things like flying around in the sky. Like, for him to live literally across the street is kind of a no-brainer, but it's such a wild thing for him to be like, it's UFOs.
Yeah.
I should alert the base that I live across the street from with airplanes and varying other technologies that I've found UFOs, and I keep seeing lights flying overhead at night. Like, what? Like, it's such a weird thing to do.
It is, but from the documentary that I watched and the literature that I've read on it, all the accounts that Paul Bennewitz was actually a really sharp guy, like a really intelligent individual.
Yeah.
And so I'm on the same boat as you when it comes to that, Stephen, where it's like, well, he's a smart dude. How can he not put two and two together? But there's also, in my head, there's street smarts and then there's book smarts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And he may be a genius at his field and everything, but he probably didn't have the clout to put two and two together, just because people are like, and it's easy to view it that way because everybody's wired differently, and everybody thinks differently and has a different thought process. I have no idea your day-to-day operations, Ryan, how your brain works. I have no idea what yours are like, Steven. You guys have no idea how mine's like and how I think. It's just weird, and so I think I can see why he might have overlooked that a bit. It's the OSI's response that kind of got me, because they kind of realized that they were picking up he was picking up some things that they didn't want him to know about, and rather than being like, hey, you stop and keep it secret,
yeah,
they pulled the biggest lie with this poor man and basically ruined his life. And it devolves into, like, and I feel like I've given you guys enough of a running ground to go, because I don't want to be the only one talking about this the entire go.
Yeah.
But
so the thing that you're talking about that ruined his life is the fact that the members of that base actually gave him papers to decode the supposed UFO communications he was receiving,
and computer equipment.
Yeah, like they gave him everything he needed to decode with quotation marks there, only for him to basically get these false messages and then like try to actually like tell people about it. And this is where you get that whole thing of like information's king. So if you're given something to get a message and that message is absolute insanity, but you believe it's real, you'll go around telling everyone this is real because you believe it's real. Yeah. But to everybody else around you, you sound like a crazy person.
Not only do you believe it's real, but you approach the Air Force base across the street from you with this information, and apparently they think it's real too, because now they're providing you with equipment and the means to research it. So you've just added credibility to this man's insanity and pushed him further down this dark rabbit hole.
And this falls into what we've talked about in previous episodes. The whole, if your mind is looking for it, it will most likely find it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So if you find, it's called tulpas. Yes, tulpas. Yeah. Sorry, I stole your statement.
Those are exclusively reserved for horny My Little Pony fans. You should know this from my episode. All right.
Oh, well, that's the thing about Horowitz. He was notoriously.
He was a brony.
If it was
Paul
the
Bennewitz
80s,
was a brony, confirmed.
Oh my god.
Oh fuck!
But
I said Horowitz.
So this actually gets into Jesus. I'm trying to be a professional right now.
Welcome aboard.
Well, the whole thing is like, this is actually a really good account of what you're going to be getting into. So what Z is talking about is essentially there is a branch of the U.S. military, well, particularly the Air Force. This is actually something you can confirm. It is something that exists, and I can confirm exists because it was when I was in the military myself. It was a branch. It was a department in the Air Force that you would hear talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But they specialize in a lot of different things, including like, counter domestic terrorism, investigations into all kinds of reports, including unidentified flying objects and stuff like that. So it's actually not unlikely that they did learn about these things and investigate these things. So you could have seen someone dressed up that way, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're like making coins disappear or anything like that.
No.
But what they did excel at, and this is actually considered part of their operations to a level that, you can't really say without being a member of that. I mean, most of it's to a degree just kind of like a generic definition of what their function is in the military, but some of it is basically intelligence. And as we know from intelligence, you can do a lot of interesting things, especially with misinformation. So if you look at all of the for over the years, I mean, the OSA may not even been called OSI back in the day, but there could be a similar department in the government that operated the same way even back in earlier times, that would basically share this information, certain bits of information, but also put in some falsehoods. So when these people grabbed onto that information, which they clearly got from somewhere, they would then run with it. But they sell the idea that this is crazy. Like when this guy starts making up messages supposedly from UFOs, and then the rest of the world, the rest of the government's like, that's crazy. That's not true at all. And so if he looks crazy, he feels crazy. It's like gaslighting somebody in the world of the UFOs.
So they not only gaslit Paul. So this guy Richard Doty, he didn't only gaslit Paul. He actually befriended him and became really good friends. And at one point, of course, in the interview that I watched of him, he says, quote unquote, that he actually at one point he told him to drop all this, live your life, move on, destroy the research and move on. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because it's his job, Richard Doty's job, to basically spread disinformation. So when he goes to Paul and says, like, as a friend, not as an agent, you should get rid of all the information and live your life and do this, is it him perpetuating disinformation, or is it him telling kinds of facts because this stuff is real? Because they said about 80% of it is bullshit, what the government has been putting out, but they have to put some facts in it in order to sell it to people.
Yeah.
And then 20% is real. So this guy basically, not this guy alone, there was many people acting. He just became the public figure because he got named in some some journalist's piece,
Mm-hmm.
and he became a public figure. But he not only manipulates Paul, who ended up being committed at the end of all this.
Yeah.
He would go to UFO conventions. Doty would, just to see what everybody's talking about and the responses, and everybody in the UFO community knew who he was and what he was there for. And and there's more to it too. Yeah,
it's like reconnaissance work. If you want to sell misinformation, you need to know what everybody's actually already sharing.
Yeah. So they did a CIA study in 1997 and found that over half of the UFO reports in that time, over those 2 decades, were accounted for by manned reconnaissance flights. And it detailed all about how the OSI, along with the CIA, used or promoted UFOs to cover up classified reconnaissance planes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, they had to test those drones and other technology they use now at some point. So it's an easy blame if somebody sees a drone, which no one has ever seen before until it was developed and presented to people. Like military drones, most likely in the case of most military technology, is ahead, but they got to test it all first. So if you have something like a drone in like the 90s popping up over in the woods, because you want to do it in a less populated area, well, of course it's easy to blame those crazy aliens are out there again. Then try to explain that you're working on an unmanned flying object that can deliver information and video feeds or drop ordnance. Like that's the kind of information you don't want your enemies to have ahead of time.
Yeah, because not to cut you off, Stephen, but like the Russians were at the time were actually sending, from what I read, they were actually sending their own agents into the UFO community, communities, just trying to get some kind of information, because they kind of got wise that that's what our government was doing, and so they would show up, and so that's why that they're basically diluting the waters with falsities. There's some truth in there. It's like cutting your dad's whiskey and sneaking some whiskey. It's like you'll get a little bit of it in there, but it's not. But for the rest, it's just watered down bullshit.
Right. I love that we got a glimpse into your childhood right now. Like this.
Cheers.
I'll have you know that I was a good kid, and I never did that to my parents.
Good at stealing whiskey.
So the OSI was like, they were pretty hot and heavy for quite a while in that time period, and then we didn't really hear much about them for a couple of decades until one man came along and said, "Where are you?"
Oh boy, yeah. I figured
I'm so sorry.
Oh, nice. I'm not doing that shit.
You can tell the story though.
You can't make me imitate Tom DeLonge, one of the well-known faces of the punk band from the late 90s, early 2000s. Blink 182.
Blink 182.
Yeah. So this guy is a big UFO researcher at this point. He's established an organization that actually researches this stuff, and he actually got the Navy and the Department of Defense to confirm that I think it was 3 videos that were taken from onboard cameras.
I think it was 2 videos.
It was the gimbal and
the Go Fast.
Yeah.
And his group is called the To the Stars Academy.
So this guy is something else. I feel bad because I don't want to come across as being disrespectful, because he's clearly putting in a lot of effort. He has the resources, he has the passion, and look, getting the government to go, yeah, we actually have no idea what that is, and that's true. That's an impressive feat when it comes to any kind of people who are into UFO research. The only problem is there's some other thing, like when you get him talking, I've seen his conversations in some articles with some pretty big magazines.
So it's funny because I remember when this all came out. We were all still in lockdown when this came out, correct? I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So this came out during lockdown, and I remember when this came forward, and we were all so fed up. At least in my neck of the woods, we were all just so fed up of government throwing shit at us, COVID-19, all this shit that was just happening all at once. Earthquakes in my state were happening, like that. When they basically said, like, we don't know what that is, yeah, it could be aliens, like, at least me and my group of friends, we were all like, we don't give a shit.
Yeah.
It's like,
it seems like nobody did, because it's like, let's be realistic, the culture has been turned into TV shows.
mm-hmm.
Like, you watch Discovery Channel and you see paranormal caught on camera. History Channel had Ancient Aliens, and there's countless shows about this shit, which, by the way, no Men in Black showed up and shut that bad boy down. Dan Aykroyd believes the Men in Black shut down one of his shows about UFOs, but mostly I think it was just because it was on the Sci-Fi Channel and they were getting chopped to death at the time. But like, it's also like, so I respect Tom DeLonge quite a bit for doing the UFO research and like actually getting some results, which unfortunately it does seem like mostly nobody gives a fuck about, which is
crazy that they're still
bad timing.
They're still pushing it. Like, they're still like, they came out and they were like, oh, you know what, those are unidentified objects, those 2 videos, to now, as of May of this year, the Pentagon has reported over 400 UFO encounters.
And none of us care.
We were like, we know, old man.
How many times
am I going to have to teach you this
lesson?
No, calling the government old.
Oh.
But okay, so I'm gonna read a section of this. Tom is from an interview in Esquire with Tom DeLonge, which I'm always really happy with. Like his other bands, Angels and Airwaves and Boxcar Racer, I actually enjoy quite a bit, and I do have a fondness for Blink-182.
It's not a music review podcast, Steve.
Shut up. But when he says things like I'm about to say to you, it doesn't help sell your stuff. Like, this is what he says. He goes, the interview asked him about UFOs, and he's like, I can't say that I'm the guy that has it in my garage to prove everything, but the evidence does not suggest it's coming from planets. The evidence suggests what physics suggests, which is that time is parallel. It's not linear. I mean, everything past, present, and future is being manifested at exactly the same moment, which could be consciousness. That unified mind light is just creating fucking every possibility all at the exact same time. So what does that mean? Some life form is really advanced at the same time that we're not, and can tune into our timeline and then tune out? It's like dimensional. So the craft aren't spaceships. They're more like submarines. They're more like displacement craft. They're displacing the fabric of space-time and creating new geodesics that just go from here to here, bypassing timelines. Like
interdimensional beings, actually.
Yes, it's a lot. Like it's like, oh, cool, you did this thing, but you're going down another path that says even weirder stuff. So it doesn't help sell your stuff. So, I mean,
to wrap this back to Men in Black, the Tom DeLonge just basically went and outed all of these aliens, and the government basically said yes. And no stories of the Men in Black,
none,
has showed up.
As a matter of fact, there's been almost no real heavy accounts of the Men in Black in recent years.
No, I honestly think that it could be one of two things. Like, either it's all made up. It's all an account of stories. They just saw a guy. If they did see them, it was just a bunch of dudes cosplaying as Blues Brothers, or doing, or this
was during the era of Blues Brothers. The Blues Brothers were cosplaying people cosplaying Blues Brothers.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Time is not linear, okay? It happens all at the same time. It's parallel. Just because. So, or if it is real, the division of that division of the government has been dissolved, and they don't send them out anymore. Which would also kind of make sense, because they're basically saying, like, the public's good enough to know at this point. So
I have my own opinion.
Let's hear.
I think they were quite real. I don't think they were aliens. I think they were a branch of the government, whether it was CIA or the OIB or whatever, or something before
KFC, CNN, YMCA.
And I think they were. I think. I mean, obviously, the government is now confirming, hey, UFOs exist. We don't know what these things are. I I'm of the mind that I believe in it. I think that this organization was, now the government's known about this for a while, to at first it was to quieten people because we don't want to cause a hysteria. People in the 40s can't fucking handle aliens. They can barely handle the economy, right?
Yeah.
And so they continued that line of thinking for a while, all the way up into the end of the century. And then we get things like the internet, where it's a lot easier to quiet one guy who can only talk to the 6 people in his town versus quieting someone on social media, right? And so at this point, hey, we can't keep up this game we were playing back 100 years ago. We got to do something different now. Let's just tell them they're real. Like, I mean, let's just let them have it.
And no one cared.
Yeah, and no one cared.
But that's the thing also, because did like, to cross into conspiracy theory aspects of it, did we get inoculated towards the whole thing slowly over time through? Because that's another theory. That's another thing that they're talking about, is that movies, all the sci-fi movies were catered towards us. A lot of media is catered for all these fucking ghost shows. Yeah,
you know, we got enough 20% of truth to actually add up to like 95%. So no one gives a shit anymore.
We saw enough sci-fi movies with aliens in them that when we found out aliens are real, we'd be like, yeah, duh, of course. Like,
but there's
thanks,
also like
government for finally telling us what we already knew. We've all seen Star Trek.
Look, I'm gonna wrap this up in the best way I can honestly say, is what it really is. The reason why the Men in Black exist is they're the guys coming. They're the guys going around being like, God, stop it. We are already the asshole neighbors. Let's not make it worse. All right. Like the aliens are in the other galaxy looking at our planet going, fuck, I don't want to go knock on their door. It's they look like trouble. They look like white trash.
And then and the UFOs always like leave
a little bit.
they legit, like, when they see that we've seen them, they have that oh shit moment, and that's when the UFOs disappears. Like, oh shit, they see us.
Like there's like they're peeking over the fence, like, oh,
it's like a dare. It's like a dare all the young teenage aliens do. Like, you want to go over and jump the Earth tracks, and you know.
I just love this theory in my head that we, in terms of like intergalactic species, we're the drunk rednecks that no one wants to interfere with. We got burnout cars on our lawn.
We are the Alabama of the universe. For sure.
Seriously.
Full offense, Alabama.
Full offense, Alabama.
I don't know what they're talking about.
Not sorry. I was told recently in a comment that I shouldn't apologize for our show, so not sorry.
Jesus. Okay, I'll leave it at this. I challenge you, intergalactic species, to prove us wrong. Find more trashy aliens than us.
You don't like this planet, then you can get out.
Oh my God.
All right. Wrap us up, Z.
All right, everybody. Thank you for going on this journey with the Men in Black with us, guys. Ryan, Steven, thank you. It's always a blast recording with you guys. I look forward to keep continuing this show. Absolutely. As always, guys, if you haven't yet, please subscribe and like the video. Help us fight the algorithm demon. Do what you got to do. And check out our merchandise that we have. We have a few cool shirts already up, and we have some new merchandise in the pipeline coming your way. So keep an eye out for that. You can email us at chaoticpubcast@gmail.com. Also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find us on Chaos Included TV. Thank you. But our TikTok's just Chaos Included. So links in the description below. Anyway, guys.
You'll figure it out.
You're all internet. So you're all young people. We're the old ones. All right.
Speak for yourself. All right, guys. Have a great night, and I'll see you next time.
Fuck you, Alabama.